I said I'm Tom. I work at Orangebeard as a CTO slash product owner, and Orangebeard is a product that is built by Pregus. Closer? Okay. And we focus on software testing. And to introduce a little bit about what we're doing and why we're doing it, I would like to take you on a brief history of software testing. I don't know, is everybody, does everybody know what software testing entitles in your organizations? Or are there people who never ever see anybody testing any software? Okay, let's assume everybody knows a bit. A long time ago, most projects in software were following a waterfall kind of process, and we were engineering requirements, designing something. Then we started developing it, and the idea was that we test it, then that everything is fine. We deploy it, and then start maintenance. On a time scale of months, we had maybe 1 or 2 releases each year, and in practice, we did requirements, designed, we developed, and by the time development started, the testers also started creating Excel sheets, which were huge, by the way, with test cases in it. And then they started testing, and it was more like this, because at first the first test failed, and then it had to go back, and a bug had to be fixed, and then it had to be deployed again, and we started again, and the second test failed. And so on and so on. And by the end of this, there were deadlines coming up, and we were eating lots of takeout food. And then by the end of it, maybe we could get back to deploying it and maintaining it. So we had to fix this because testing was a bottleneck in getting software to a production environment. So we had a solution, one solution to rule them all, the holy grail of software testing, which is, of course, automation. We were starting to automate all those Excel sheets. So we had keyword-driven frameworks, record and playback tools, and we started automating all the work that we were doing. And then we had all those test cases, and all those test cases were automated, and then we were waiting for the automation to finish. And then the automation got unstable, and then, well, same problem, bit of a different scale. So that didn't really fix it, and by the time we realized as testers, the whole world was starting to do agile software development. So we thought maybe it's a good idea to jump on that bandwagon and start testing within the sprints, which is obviously a good idea. We could start a bit sooner, take smaller chunks of work, have smaller Excel sheets with test scripts, and automate as it was built. So that was a good idea. But then in practice, by the end of the sprint, all the user stories were in the test column. We had a test column back then. And everybody was waiting for those bloody testers again. So, yeah, after writing new issues, new work items for every bug that we encountered in our automated tests, after the demonstration, we had to get some extra time for sprint planning to plan on how to fix all these issues again. So, pretty much the same issue again, but again on a smaller scale. So we started to move on, and then we saw all those developers developing stuff and developing their processes and modernizing everything. So stuff was more automated, infrastructure is automated, deployments are automated, data is automated. So maybe it's a good idea to jump on that bandwagon as testers and automate everything that we can find. Like, of course, we have some component tests, some unit tests, and then we have some integration tests and maybe end-to-end tests. And that worked pretty well. We started having these pipelines and everything started to be automated. And then we had these acceptance tests and they were working okay. And then the companies were getting a bit bigger. We had some more teams and we had to scale. And most of those scaling worked, except for the acceptance testing. Because again, we were able to get a change to production theoretically in 5 minutes. But we had 7.5 hours of acceptance testing to do. So the pipeline was blocked for all that time, and all the other pipelines were stacking, and everybody was waiting for the previous pipeline to succeed until their change could be deployed. So we were eating takeout again, this time with the whole team. And we were, again, waiting for those bloody testers to finish their jobs. So all in all, what we've seen in the last, for me, 18 years of software testing, we keep doing the exact same thing over and over again. And somehow, we expect different outcomes from doing the same thing over and over again, which is odd. So we saw this as a problem at Orangebeard. And we wanted to fix that. So to sum up the problems that we encountered is that we see that more automation doesn't automatically improve the insight and the quality of the software you're developing or releasing. More automation means pretty much more tests. And now that we know that it's a good idea to make tests smaller, we have even more tests. And it costs us on the inside side of things. So we are mostly steering on, do we have nice green checkboxes or green bubbles, or if you're still using Jenkins, the bubbles are blue now, but is everything green, then we can go to production. But what does it mean if everything's green? Is everything fine? Do we not have any failed tests? But did we actually test? Or even worse, all the tests have failed. That's perfectly normal. They're not reliable, but the software is fine, so let's deploy it to production. Happens as well. It takes a lot of time also to do analysis on what failed. Tests fail. Most of the time, if a test fails, it's because you're lagging behind on automation. Sometimes it's because your environment is not set up correctly. Sometimes you have some issues with your test data. And in about maybe 7 or 8% of the time, you actually found a bug. And all those defects have to be analyzed. You have to figure out what happened. Why did my test fail? Is it one of these reasons? Do I actually have a problem with my software? And it takes a lot of time. So that feedback loop is still too long. The knowledge you need for using all those test automation tools is not everywhere. It's hard to find people. We still need a lot of knowledge. We've seen customers with maybe 15 teams using 8 different test tools for doing the same task, because all teams are autonomous. They make their own choices in the tooling they use. So it gets hard to see from one team what the other team is doing. It's hard to help out each other if you're running against a deadline. So everything, it's always reporting in different ways, and people have to be able to read all those reports. It takes time. And all in all, testing remains a bottleneck in getting stuff marketed. If we look at pipelines, most of them, testing accounts for at least half the time the pipeline is running. While if you ask anyone, should testing cost you half the time of your development or your release cycle, everybody's going to say no. So we try to build a solution for that. And that's what Orangebeard is now. We provide with one place where you can get all of your test results. So instead of having to look at Jenkins, look at Azure DevOps, look at your GitLab pipelines, look at local HTML reports, we provide one place to send all test results. So be it a unit test that runs on a developer laptop, or an acceptance test that runs in a pipeline on an end-to-end environment, you can send all the data to Orangebeard, and then you have clear reporting. You know what is being tested and when. You can also see what application and what version of applications is under test at that point, and we keep all history for that. So you have clear reports, you're auditable, and you regain an overview of what is happening in your testing process. What we also do is automatically analyze defects. Pretty often it happens that a test failed, and that test has failed before in a similar way. And sometimes it's been yesterday, sometimes it was 6 months ago, and you were only working there for 3 months, so you couldn't really know. And then you're analyzing those defects, and then after half a day of analysis, you figure out, it's the same thing we saw. So what Orangebeard does is it keeps track of all the classifications of defects. Why did it fail? You can store that, and if it happens again, it will tell you, I've seen this situation before. Best case, you're done with your analysis because it's the same situation. Worst case, you have a starting point, because defects kind of have the habit to cluster the points in the application. If it fails the same way, at the same place, there's a pretty good chance that the solution or the analysis is going to be pointing in the same direction. What we had to do for all this is connect every tool and standardize the output, which sounds like a very big job, and Of course, if you want to connect every test tool, that is a lot of work. But a test case is mainly something with a start time and end time. It has a status, and if it fails, you would hope it have some logging, some information on why it failed. So with that abstraction, we're able to connect most test tools pretty simply to Orangebeard and integrate those so that you can send in those results. So that you can always see all the testing efforts that are being done, and that you always know where the whole team is on testing. And last but not least, we want to learn from previous test runs to optimize future test runs. So imagine you're changing one little part of your system, which consists of a lot of subsystems. Then maybe it would not be very necessary to run each and every end-to-end test that you have. If you know what's changed, and we used to have test managers for that, they disappeared a little bit over the years. But then you could decide that there is not really a risk that is being mitigated by running all those tests. So you could make smart decisions based on what you've changed and run only the tests that you need, which is something that we are currently developing. Target for us is to have this live at our customers at July 1, so we're pretty close to getting there with the first part of that functionality. Zooming in on that, we call it Auto Test Pilot. It accelerates your delivery. So you want to test those tests that you need to test in the time that you have available for that, or the minimum amount of time that would be relevant to those tests. So what we do is we create a subset of test cases based on the changes that you do. So you provide with your test run a list of components in your system, and a component can be anything. It can be a class, it can be a method, it can be a subsystem, it could be a SAP with a version number, whatever you want it to be in your context, you can provide as a component and relate test cases to it. If those test cases are related, Orangebeard will prioritize them if such a component has changed. So everything you can version can be a component, and it can all link to test cases. And we detect links to test cases by checking if a test starts to behave differently after changes. So in the future, we can use those relationships to optimize even further. With that, you have a prioritized list of test cases that are most likely to fail for the change that you have done. So that's the first part. This is the scope for us for next month. And after that, the next steps are like, what did we actually change? Did we only add some tests? Does it make sense to run all the tests if we just added 2 and had no further changes? Did we just change the README? It happens. 7 hours of end-to-end testing after putting extra white space in the README. You don't really need an intelligent solution to fix that, but it still happens. Or did we change really big chunks of code? Is the risk higher? And then we want to test a little bit more. Even further along the line, we could think about who changed something and when. Is it the new guy at 3 a.m. trying to prove a point? Maybe the risk profile is different than when you have a developer that works on the same product for a lot of time and does its commits at 3 p.m. and gets coffee afterwards. And we can see what was already tested, because we are collecting all the test results on all the different levels. So if we see in a component test that interfaces haven't changed, then maybe that could imply some lower risks for certain parts of integration or end-to-end testing. So that's what we're working on. That is our roadmap for the next part of the year. But first, July, we want the left part to be done. So in practice, how does that look? You have your pipeline, you have Orangebeard, and there's a small job in your pipeline that says optimize my test set instead of just run it without thinking. So we announced that run to Orangebeard. I want to run this. This is what my system looks like. And Orangebeard will optimize it based on what we know of those components and the tests that are related to it. So it returns an optimized list that you can then use in your pipeline to optimize that test run. At first, that is something that has to be done by the end user itself. For us, the next step is to also provide integrations for the test tools that we have on the result side, and to also integrate it on the runner side, to always be able to run a subset of your tests in the right order, and then have quicker test results. So then your runner runs that customized run, and you get the reports in Orangebeard, which is always live reporting, by the way, so we don't do a test run and then send like XMLs of the report. We capture the output of the tests, so we try to match the contents of the original test reports as much as possible, and it comes into Orangebeard Live, and you can immediately start viewing along with the test run if it's a long-running test, to see actually if anything went wrong. You can put triggers on it when it starts to fail. So if you have an optimized list, chances are that the first test case is going to fail because it had the biggest chance to fail. So you would immediately be notified instead of afterwards. So we run them a lot quicker because mostly you don't have to run everything. We can start analysis immediately because the results come in real time. And the automated defect classification tells you if your test is failing because of something new, then you would have to investigate. Or if it's a bug in the product, or an issue in your environment, or maybe an issue in your automation, which would help you getting your analysis done a lot quicker. So all in all, what we help with is improving the test process by providing insight. Why are my tests failing? Where can I improve? What should I actually test for what changes? We have the execution part where we can subset and prioritize the test runs, make sure that we don't test stuff that we don't need to test. And then we have automated defect analysis that helps you on the analysis side to look at why did my test actually fail, and did this happen before. So status quo, we have a product that is operational. It's a cloud solution that you could subscribe to. Every customer has its own data. We don't mix customer data to do analysis. We don't need that. Doesn't really add value at this point. And we've got a couple of happy launching customers that we have regular, frequent discussions with on what we can improve, what we should do better, or what's really helpful. And what I would like to look at is, at the time, I have some time to do a bit of live demoing, which is always nicer than PowerPoint. So I'm going to switch to that now. If there's any questions in the meantime, feel free to ask them. Okay, so what we have, I don't know for the beamer with this weather if we should go for light or dark. I think light is better, right? Orangebeard provides you with a way to see the status of your testing. What we don't provide is all kinds of graphs and bars and lines that you can customize to show a dashboard that exactly tells your manager what you want to tell him. It just shows you the state of your automation at any point in time. So if we're looking at this, we have a demo bank. This is our workspace, which contains a bunch of projects. It's a loans and an investments project, a website project, so like a few software projects that could exist in that context. And what the overview here shows you is what is the status of your testing at this point. So how many test runs are passing and how many test sets are passing. A run is an execution of a set. So if you have 100% of passing sets, then every last run of every set was a green run, so to speak. We also summarize how the spread of defect reasons is within your workspace, but also within the project itself. If we click through to a project, like the website project, we see the different test sets that we have within the selected time frame. For that project. So we can see here that the acceptance tests have passed the last time, which are only one test case, so pretty easy to pass. We have API tests, which had a failure, and we had some unit tests and a bunch of end-to-end tests, which of course always fail because they're end-to-end tests. So everything, there's always something failing there. And this is all tests done with different tools. So if we look at the API test, it's a Postman test. And it reports, let's go back a little bit. It reports your different test suites with your test cases below them. You can click through like any test report would allow you to do. And then you can see what happened. And in this case, we did a test. We sent a message, we got a response, and we did a few checks on it, and one of the checks failed. So this gives us the opportunity to analyze this test case and why it failed. Going back. Like a completely different test run for the acceptance test. This is a test that is done in a browser by Fitnesse in this case, which reports in a completely different way. and this reports HTML, which we can also just display. If a test contains a screenshot, it will be attached, so you have all the information that you need to analyze the test case. And like the navigation is the same for every type of test tool, so there's no difference in having a unit test or a API test or an integration or an end-to-end test. So everything works the same way. You can find the results at the same place, which provides you with a lot of easy analysis to do it. And then what I wanted to do still is to run a live test. And then you can see that the results can be viewed in real time. So I have to run that one. And of course, this is always a risk because it's technology and internet connections and stuff that can fail. But let's see. Let's duplicate that again, and hopefully we get the live view. So yeah, we have the acceptance test for the website, which is obviously in this case a dummy set of tests, but if you click through on it, then we can see that the tests are being executed, and every time a test is finished, then we get an update on the information, and you can immediately start the analysis on the defects that you may encounter. So that is how Orangebeard works, and we hope it's going to be helping a lot of people in having an easier test life, less time lost on defect analysis, and mainly less time waiting on pipelines that are absolutely doing useless testing. So that concludes my story.